So whenever we are, sort of thinking about our teachers and thinking about our students, we want to make sure that we are providing them with the tools and the skills that is going to allow them to be able to speak in a global language and in a global way. I want to spend a little bit of time talking a little bit more about, sort of the workforce gaps and areas by which I look at, sort of the issues from the advanced technology perspective. Krista did an amazing job sort of talking about, what we need from a curriculum perspective, what we need to do with respect to teachers. But I want to talk a little bit more about, how we can engage better with community and how we can engage with companies and their role in really helping us thinking a little bit more about education and advanced technology and the workforce gaps and synergies. So if you don't mind, John, I'm going to share maybe a few quick slides and then I'll sort of come back down and just engage in a dialogue with the team. Okay, so I wanted to sort of begin by talking a little bit about something that has inspired me for a couple of years and how I ended up, sort of in this area of sustainability. It was really interesting. I went to college as an undergrad in a small town called Institute, West Virginia, and it's an interesting town. It's a small town, but and it's a small college. And every morning I would get up, sort of on my way to class, and there would be this horrible, horrible odor. And I just never understood what in the world is going on, and why. And it turns out that that there was a company in the backyard of this institution called Union Carbide. And Union Carbide would manufacture all these chemicals, right? And all these technologies. And you would sit there thinking, this is good for advancing technologies, but look at the health hazards, right? And it was just so painful. So I started getting a real deep interest in terms of not just the science, but really the environmental aspects. And how do we do better with respect to supporting communities, supporting universities. I was trained as a chemist, as John mentioned. I have degrees in chemistry, but I always had this passion for environmental science. And so I started to read really deeply about, what does it take? And I was really inspired by the words of Gaylord Nelson, who happened to be a Wisconsin senator. And in the early 70s, he really helped in terms of shape Earth Day. We celebrate Earth Day, but it really helps shape the dialogue that eventually led to the United States Environmental Protection Agency and really getting laws and policies passed so that we can do better with respect to how we handle things in the environment. But his inspirational talk, in one of those talks, he said, "Are we willing?" Right? As I listened to that talk and read about what he was trying to do, and just those three words, "Are we willing?" It's so deep in terms of what is the real message, right? What is the real message here with respect to sustainability, with respect to the environment, with respect to what are we doing with our kids in terms of educating them and supporting the community as a whole. And as an educator in the sciences, it was really deep for me because we all get trained in our disciplines. I think Krista said that really well. We get trained in our disciplines, but when you start thinking about problems and sustainability, it's not a disciplinary area. It's very interdisciplinary. It's really what I like to think about as wicked problems, right? And with wicked problems, you need everybody involved, regardless of what your discipline is. But we're also comfortable in our areas that trying to come out of that comfort zone and begin to integrate our work with that of others is not very comfortable, right? And in terms of being able to really address that, we have got to be willing, right? And so what I wanted to sort of talk about today is really thinking about, the challenges that we have with our environment. These are images that unfortunately you see around the world. The sustainability issues, the climate issues are everybody's issues. And I think it's really important for us to be thinking a little bit about, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you're from. These are everybody's issues. And it's so important for us to be thinking a lot about that. And because it is everybody's issues, the United Nations has taken a stand in terms of what really needs to happen. And in 2015, they developed, and this was many years of work, but they developed what is now known as the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, with the ultimate objective is to really think about communities and how do we begin to think about the people that are in those communities, how we educate, how we build that workforce, and what does it ultimately mean for human life and human prosperity. And so I'm always inspired by this, because every goal that you touch, whether it's poverty or zero hunger or good health or quality education, it takes a lot more than anybody within the disciplines. They have had 17 goals, but 169 targets. There have been over 3,800 events. There are over 1,000 publications, and there have been more than 7,000 actions out there. So what's inspiring here is that there's a lot of work that is being done. Unfortunately, it's not yet enough. And there's a lot more work that we all have to come together and do. And that's one of the reasons why I was just so excited to hear about the work John and Julian are doing and to be part of this discussion. So when I was still in grad school, there was this work that was put out by the University of Michigan, and it had to do with their sustainable assessment. And it really focused on, what does it take to do sustainability, and what does it take to do it right? And it was really interesting to, at the time, sort of somebody being trained as a chemistry major, to really look at, the words such as social and environmental justice, and then thinking a little bit more about economic and social, and then thinking more about environmental and economic. So it really began to talk about the intersectionalities of all the disciplines coming together. You really got to think of the environment. You got to think about the social perspectives. And then you got to really think about the economic perspective. You blend these together, and that's where sustainability sort of lies. And we have to be thinking about all these things together in terms of being able to truly make a difference. And so as I began to sort of work, with students as a professor, focused on environmental science and environmental engineering, I started to realize that sustainability is really at the intersection of science, engineering, agriculture, but more importantly, society. And so that's one of the things that I try to make sure that we're always thinking about. And then how do we engage students? How do we engage teachers? And how do we make sure that the community is consistently engaged? And in order to do this well, one of the things that we have began to implement, and again, I teach at the grad level at this point in time, but we really begin to think about how do you take courses that are being taught to people who are going to become educators, in terms of like how you have to take the fundamental work that has been done. There's always something fundamental, foundational, that we teach, that we can teach, at the K through 12 level, but take it all the way to the graduate level, right? We have to think about the technologies, but trying to get from the science to the engineering and the technology takes a significant amount of work. Students are not willing to sort of accept and be inspired by that if they don't understand what those applications are. You have to be able to talk about the applications. One of the biggest challenges we have as a country is the difficulty getting students inspired in the fundamental sciences. How we teach the fundamental science and being so textbook oriented. And this is hard because it's driven by educational policies. There's very specific things that every teacher is required to do because there are all these assessments that have to come out. And unless you're able to change that, you can't really change how you begin to educate, in ways that really integrate all of these pieces. And so you have, but you have to be able to figure out how to integrate that. Students are more appreciative of understanding the fundamental science if they can actually connect the dots as to what does it do for me. As a parent, I struggle with that. Watching my own child, come home, and of course I want them all to be chemists, and they're not going to be chemists, right? but I'm always like, this is why. And when you start to break it down and to really connect those applications with the foundational work, they begin to value it. And so I always push that, as we're trying to get everybody to inspire students to think about the sustainability challenges and the fact that it takes the fundamental science, it takes the engineering, it takes getting that connection with application, how we adopt it, and then we have to engage stakeholders. If we're not engaging the stakeholders, and if the stakeholders are not engaged with teachers, we are not doing the right thing for our communities. And those stakeholders that I'm thinking about are the companies in our local communities. How are our companies giving back to the K through 12 districts, right? We have to make sure that they are, and we have to get them engaged. They have got to do the work. So there's foundational knowledge in science and math. There's knowledge transfer that has to happen. We also think it's very deeply about what kind of programs can we have to support our teachers. We cannot continue to ask our teachers to do more. That's wrong. They have already too much to do, not enough support. Unfortunately, our school systems just don't have all the resources that allow our teachers to be able to do what they need to do. So it's so important for universities in our backyards, companies in our backyards, local government in our backyards to be able to give back into the K through 12 system in order for the teachers to have all the resources as well as resource of time in order for them to be able to do the work that we are asking them to do by adding things like sustainability, bringing in those applications, making sure that there's adoption. And then we also have to be thinking about ways to support these students, bringing them out or bringing programs to really help them remain engaged, right? And always be able to see themselves being able to contribute. I usually tell students, it doesn't matter whether you are somebody interested in the sciences or somebody interested in creative writing, you have a place in terms of contributing to the community when it comes to climate change, when it comes to sustainability, because sustainability and climate change are everybody's problems. And so it's really important for us to be able to support teachers and to be able to help them see if you have a kid who's really interested in creative writing or in art, right? How do you make those connections where they can actually see themselves as contributors? So community engagement is key. We do a lot of work here in, so I'm located in Greensboro, North Carolina, and we do a lot of work going into school districts. We bring kids, we bring them into the lab. We really spend a significant amount of time making sure that we are thoughtful about the kids. Because if we don't invest in them, right, they're not going to show up in our universities, right? For those of you that are in the higher ed, higher education industry, you're beginning to see what they call this educational sort of demographic cliff, right? We're losing enrollment, we're having all sorts of issues, but part of the challenge is kids are not thinking about, what's the point of going to college and spending all this money if I'm not really getting the tools that I need in order to really be an effective contributor? I can do that without the college degree, right? And so it's really important for universities to really be more thoughtful and to maybe even change how they do their offerings in order for us to really capture what's going on in that community. And so when we engage, we make sure that the students are really having those connections and really getting to see how industry actually works, what is needed, and how do we get them to understand that at a very early age. So we bring them into our facilities. Everybody's so worried about, oh no, we can't bring kids into our facilities. We can't bring teachers into our facilities. Yes, we can. By making sure that we are bringing in the safety components, by making sure that the staff that we have ways to be able to translate what they do in ways that teachers can easily integrate into the day-to-day examples, by making sure that they don't use terminology that sometimes may be a little off-putting to how a student learns or how a parent perceives things. So we really think a lot about language. How are we describing what is being done to, for the kids, for the teachers? How do we make sure we're exposing them? We also let them know that there's a lot of technology that takes place, right? So just like a kid may say, you know what, I want to go work on cars, or I want to be a mechanic. Well, you can work in a scientific facility or an engineering facility and still be doing a lot of those mechanical issues, right? And addressing that. So we make sure we have the state-of-the-art facilities. I can tell you that there is an extreme shortage in terms of a workforce of people who know how to work in these facilities. A piece of equipment like this that you could sort of correlate to your car, when it breaks, it's really hard to get someone to in a science building to know what to do to repair it, right? And so making sure that we are building the workforce that knows how to be able to fix some of these instruments, how to utilize them, how to gather data from them. All of that is so important to being able to do the science and the engineering that is necessary to address issues related to sustainability. And so we have to really be thinking about that hands-on knowledge. So Krista talked a lot about, sort of the hard work that we have to do sort of with the curriculum perspective. And so we have to also think about what else are we doing to give them that hands-on experience, right? So that they can be able to correlate what's happening with respect to what I'm learning in the classroom, meeting the competency requirements, but then how does that really apply to what we need to do on a day-to-day basis? And so people always ask me, well, how do we do this, right? We want to do it. We're ready to do it. What do we do? And what I always say is that we have got to partner, whether it's with, whether it's a university partnering with a school district or some local organization, but there's money out there. And these are some of the agencies that we, at least myself and my team, have gone out to try to find funding so that we can engage a lot of these younger kids in educating them. The National Science Foundation has several programs, National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Education. And then on a local level, there's when I used to live in Michigan, we had a lot of support from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation that really focused on workforce. And then IUPAC is a chemistry organization that also has been really good about helping support K through 12 education and work done by universities with teachers. It stands for the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. And then I want to sort of dig a little deeper in terms of, making those correlations and why it's so important. One of the things I like to usually show this image. So John talked a little bit about, I'm dean of this thing called the Joint School of Nanoscience and Nanoengineering. And everybody always says, well, what in the world is nano? What are you talking about? And so I like to be able to break that down to people like nano. Everybody says I've never heard of that word. I have never seen that thing. I don't know what you're talking about. And I always say yes, you have. Yep, you use nano every day. Nano's part of who you are. And so sometimes we use words that sometimes may be a little bit more off-putting, right? Rather than allowing us to really truly understand what they truly mean. So I always talk about, things on the nanoscale being things that, everybody's using. When you think of I remember when I had moved to North Carolina and my allergies were out of control because of the amount of pollen that we have here. I went to the pharmacy and I got a little bottle of Zyrtec and I started popping Zyrtec. And I was like, this is great stuff. And so as I was like, taking Zyrtec, I was like, what are the ingredients, right? Because I'm always worried about like, what am I putting in my body? And there was something called zinc oxide. And I'm like, oh gosh, I make zinc oxide every day in my lab. And so Zyrtec has nanomaterials in it. They're basically particles that are on a smaller scale. Um, and then you start thinking a little bit more about like where are all these nanomaterials showing up? They're showing up in your makeup, they're showing up in your lotion, they're showing up in your sunscreen, they're in your paint, they're everywhere. And within your own body, DNA is a nanomaterial. Your proteins are little like nanomaterials again that are little engines out there. And so nano is everywhere, but the beauty of it is you're always able to design things that tend to have better um ability to solve problems, right? um with respect to like how you would if you didn't have the material at that small scale. So we're designing really tools that allow us to look at things at a very, very small scale. And so with nanotechnology, we've been able to like work very closely with the American Chemical Society, to really think a lot more about how do we engage teachers and students to really begin um, to think about sustainability. I want to tell you a little bit about the American Chemical Society, but particularly the Division of Environmental Chemistry. And if anybody here is interested in learning more, becoming more involved, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about some of their programs and how to get you involved in them. But it has over 3,000 members. They have technical programs that lead to a lot of work being done. We're sort of national, so we're all over the country. It sponsors student members to attend different programs such as the Conference and Parties that talks a lot about climate science. We've been very fortunate to have students actually go and argue at a global scale, at the global stage as well. We have an environmental film competition where we work with teachers and students to really look at problems that they have in their backyard and make a film out of it. Students love to make videos, but it's a really good way to just get them involved, to get them excited. It's all about like, how do we make sure we get these kids excited about the work that is being done? Whether they fully understand it or not will come later, but we have to get them like excited and energized and interested. We also spend a significant amount of time really thinking about who our members are and how do we make sure that there's a lot of programs to be able to support them. So linking with these organizations is key because they can really find ways to work closely with our teachers and to provide the support that is needed. In addition to working with them, there's also a second benefit. It's really important for these organizations to learn more from what the teachers need, right? So it's a two-way thing. A lot of times, teachers think, well, they're just going to come and give me the information. What I try to tell teachers is like, no, we have got to learn from you. So if you're a teacher out there and there's a company or an organization reaching out to work with you, I think it's really important for you to sort of make sure that you are communicating to them exactly what you need and how you need it. These organizations are also learning from you. And we have to make sure that it's a two-way communication because we don't want to be out there trying to create things that are not useful at the end of the day. We're very good at doing that. Sometimes we create things, we think that they're going to work, but unless there's a proper communication back and forth, we're not going to be able to make sure that we are delivering the right type of thing. I want to leave you with a couple of things. I'd like to talk a little bit more about sort of this global perspective and why it's so important for us to really be thinking of getting our teachers to think a lot more sort of globally about sustainability issues. Solutions to address climate science and climate change or anything related to sustainability really are coming from all over the world. There are technologies happening in different countries. There are technologies being outsourced to different countries. There's a lot of work being done around the world, and there's so much for us to be able to adopt from what is happening globally. And so we have to take sort of this global perspective, because what is happening in one part of the world is eventually going to come to us and back, and vice versa. So so whenever we are, sort of thinking about our teachers and thinking about our students, we want to make sure that we are providing them with the tools and the skills that is going to allow them to be able to speak in a global language and in a global way. We spend a lot of time sort of finding funding and wanting to always collaborate with school districts so that we can take students abroad and get them to really see things differently. Exposure is key. Getting them to really understand how difficult some of these challenges are from a global perspective is so important to how we solve the problems overall. And so I want to stop with that and make sure that I'm answering questions. Happy to talk more, but I'll pause here and just make sure that I'm taking any questions that you have. And I want to make sure that Julian and John and Krista and I get to also have a good dialogue. So I'm gonna stop right there.
Thank you so much.
Okay, there we go.
Well, that was great. I heard hands clapping. But first off, I think it's really fascinating when we look at these things. I really applaud you for your outreach to students through your own system. I think that's highly important, and we really got to reach people to get them engaged and involved in the first place, especially in the field of science. One of the things that I do find really important that you said, and I think it's that work to cross boundaries within any organization, within campuses. Colleges tend to, whether we like it or not, they tend to divide themselves, partition themselves up, and it's often hard to get the participation from all of the groups you'd like to see involved with what you do. And so any little tips there about how you think you should approach that?
Yeah, thank you, John, for that question. The siloing of the disciplines it's a lot, and I think one of the things that I tend to worry about too is the not only is there a silo, but there's a little bit of what I tend to think of certain perceptions of how certain disciplines are. Like everything tends to be in a box, right? And when you're in a box, it makes it really, really hard to sort of get out and be comfortable with other things. And so one of what we tend to do is we're fortunate to be in this nanoscience and nanoengineering area, which forces you to be interdisciplinary. As we were establishing our program, we decided that in the building, we were going to pick faculty who came from so many different disciplines and house them all together. And it has worked. They tend to, run into each other in the hallway. They tend to realize, oh yeah, you're doing this. How about we do this? So it really raises creativity. One of the ways that I think that can also help is getting, organizations together, or you can call them working sessions or work groups or teams. If there's ever on a university level, and I've had the pleasure within the last 3 months working with Julian on something that was really exciting, but we were able to, just think a little bit more about you know, how, like, what would it take if we were to create a workforce that focuses on getting teachers to have the skills needed so that they could be like sort of those translators. And I've learned so much from the great work and the conversations that I've had with Julian in terms of, you know, a lot of times workers will come and they want to go straight to the students, right? They skip the teacher because we formed that group. There's somebody who comes with a background in music, somebody who has a background in education, somebody with a background in geography. I come in with the science background, but the dialogues that we have had and finding those areas where they come together, sort of like the overlap in terms of what we're saying, we have learned so much. And every time we leave those meetings, it's so inspiring. So I guess to answer your question, like we've got to find ways to form small groups to get people out of those like siloed areas and to get them in conversations, because when you do that, you tend to find that there's a lot more we have a lot more in common than differences. We're all
Right.
worried about, you know, like things that are going on. So if you have like ways to like help shape policy, things help shape the economy, things like allowing us to teach better, I think just coming out of those zones just makes it a much healthier way. And I think that's one way by which we can just make communities better. So organizing and bringing people from different backgrounds, getting them to talk about maybe a common topic is a really, really good way to get